October was probably the best reading month I've had of the year regarding the amount of books that I've read. I think it's because I started doing this TBR challenge and I'm really focusing on trying to read all my physical books. In the beginning of October, I had 173 unread books on my shelves. The end of October, October 31st, I ended with 148 unread books on my shelves. The reason why the number dropped is because I have been going through my bookshelves and ruthlessly unhauling books. Like, if I hold it and it doesn't bring me joy, it's gone. Also, I read 9 books. 3 of the books that I read I owned before 2024, and 4 of the books that I read I bought within 2024, I should say. I read 3 books physically and listened to 6 audiobooks. And on top of that, I also DNF'd 3 books. So, without further to say, let's talk about the books that I read. So we're going to go in order of when I finished them. And the first book that I finished in October is The Wickwire Watch by Jacqueline Hagan. This book is advertised as like a steampunk Oliver Twist, and it is a lot like that. It also reminded me a lot of Harry Potter, whereas like, you know, you have like the whole magical world hidden from our current world. This book follows a young boy named Inkwell Featherfield, and by the way, that name is freaking awesome. This book follows a young boy named Inkwell Featherfield, and by the way, that name is freaking awesome, and his adventures of how he kind of falls in with this crew of people on a flying village. There is a lot of creepiness to the story. There's a lot of mystery. There's a lot of intrigue and action. I did find, however, that the book was almost written like 3 novellas put together. So the beginning is very much like a different book. The middle is very like cozy slice of life, kind of getting to know everybody, feeling, you know, getting to know the environment that they're in. And then the end is like the ending, like the conclusion, the epicness. So I felt like because it was broken up into those things, I kind of felt disconnected from it and didn't really enjoy it as much as I wanted to. But I do have to give kudos that it was a lot of fun. The characters were very interesting. The world was very interesting. Not to mention a flying village. Like, Howl's Moving Castle, say no more. I gave this book 4 stars, and although I did really enjoy it, I don't think it's going to be a favorite series, therefore it's not going to be a priority series. And I will continue on and listen to the audiobooks probably in 2025. So the next book that I picked up in October, I actually DNF'd, and that is How to Become a Dark Lord and Die Trying by Janglo Wexler. Originally, I really was very excited about this book because it is the same author that wrote the Burning Blade and Silver Eye trilogy, which I absolutely adore. And also the premise sounded really funny, which is like the hero keeps dying in this Groundhog Day scenario, and after dying so many times and failing to defeat the Dark Lord, she decides to become the Dark Lord. So all of that sounded really fun to me. But once I actually got into the book and started reading the book, it was very apparent that there is a type of sense of humor in this that I just couldn't connect with. At times, it was almost vulgar. I'm not saying that I'm a prudish person that doesn't like vulgar things. It has to be done in a certain way. And I felt like this was done in a very immature way. Not to mention, I was expecting to get like a Groundhog Day scenario, but in fact, it was more like a villainess scenario, which is like villainess is like an anime style, which basically is a person dies and then they get reincarnated as the bad person. And I absolutely hate that trope. That was very unfortunate, so I did DNF this and I owned it, so I have unhauled it. So the next book I want to talk about I actually finished, and that is The Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I vlogged this and you can see my honest reaction. It was such a great reading experience. I originally picked this up when it came out and when everybody was talking about it and loving it, and I DNF'd it because I listened to the audiobook. And the original audiobook I really didn't like. I thought it was bad. I didn't like it. But then I found out that there is a graphic audio version of this, so I listened to the graphic audio version of this, and it was the best decision ever. With the vast cast of narrators, it was such a great reading experience, and if you haven't tried a graphic audio audiobook, I really do recommend them. They're a lot of fun. So not only did I enjoy the graphic audio, I loved the story. I loved it so much. I didn't realize how much I missed Dragon Rider stories until I started reading this. It's very shiny. I'm going to move it over here. I am in my romantasy era, and I think I just picked this up at the perfect time because I blew through this book and I gave it 5 stars. And I'm definitely going to be continuing on with the series. I have Iron Flame, so it's ready to go when I had the opportunity. Shocked that I loved it. Also kind of not shocked because it gave me like a very nostalgic feeling of when I was like addicted to certain books in this book series. So for that, I gave it 5 stars. And the next book that I finished in October is Chasm by Stacey McEwen. This is the second book in the Ledge trilogy. Oh no, it's the Glaceon trilogy. And I read Ledge last month, absolutely adored it, thought it was such a great book. It brings me back to the 2010s when dystopians were all the rage, but unlike the other ones, this one has more of a fantastical element because there's literally ice creatures with wings. I loved Ledge. I did not love Chasm. And I'm really, really sad about that. The way that Ledge ended, I had such high hopes, but then right away, in this book, something that happened at the end of Ledge, I don't want to say because it gives away, but I just didn't like how this book started and where it progressed to. It was very much a middle book syndrome. Like it was just almost like the purpose of the book was to get these characters from point A to point B, but the entire plot was just them getting from point A to point B, and I felt like I don't really remember what happened in the book. And then the more I read, I was realizing that there was not really a lot of consequences to certain things. For example, if someone gets stabbed in the stomach, and then the next chapter they're like, ow, it kind of hurts, and then the chapter after that they're like perfectly fine. I felt because things were instantly resolved, the stakes weren't that high, and I kind of stopped caring as much. But I really did enjoy where the story went, and I'm very curious to know how this trilogy ends. So I will be picking up Valley, which is the third one. I'm just not in a rush right now as it stands. So I think I gave this book 3.5 stars. Okay, so the next book I also talked about in one of my vlogs, and that is Godkiller by Hannah Kenner. This book is like a YouTube darling. Like this was all the craze when Elliot Brooks talked about it a couple years ago. And I can totally understand why. I can totally see why a lot of people love this book. There's a lot of things that I really did enjoy a book. I loved the gods in the story. I loved the characters. I loved the relationship between the characters and the plot. But the way that the plot happened, I felt very disconnected from. It's a very short book, and there's so much that happens in this book, and I mean so much. So I listened to the audiobook and I wasn't really paying attention to the chapters, but when I kind of checked the book for a reference for something, I realized that I've only like listened to like 50 pages worth, and I'm like, it felt like I listened to a whole book already because of how fast the plot went and the way that you're being told to care about these characters instead of organically caring about them kind of made me disconnected from it. So I did only give this like 3.5 stars. And I will be honest, I'm not really in a rush to complete this series. Maybe I will wait until the third book comes out before deciding if I want to go on or not. So as it stands right now, this is very a low priority for me. The next book I finished in October is The Fractured Dark by Megan E. O'Keefe. This is the second book in the Devouring World series. This is a sci-fi romance series. I really, really, really loved The Blighted Star, the first book in this series. I loved how creepy it was. I loved getting to know the characters and their relationship. It was just so good. It was so good. But this one, not so good. This book is way too big for what happens. I liked the first book because it was on a planet and there was like a lot of weird, creepy things happen. Whereas the second book, you're off a planet and you're now like in like space stations and stuff like that. This book just kept going around in circles. It was repeating the same plot points over and over again, just regurgitating them in different manners. And I felt myself not caring. I was just like, oh, we're going back to this plot trope again. Oh, the characters are doing this again. Oh, like it was a lot of like repeating the same things, like I'm repeating this. I felt like there were so many times in this book that it could have been wrapped up with a satisfying ending, but then it just kept going and going. So yeah, towards the end, I was hate reading this, and I even switched to the audiobook because I just needed to get through it. The only reason that I didn't DNF this series is because I love the first one so much, and I love the world and like the story, And I absolutely love the two main characters and their relationship. Like, they have such a wonderful relationship, and I absolutely loved it. But I hated what happened in this book, and I honestly don't remember, I would say about 80% of it, because it just kept going around and around and around. But I have heard a lot of similar thoughts saying that this book didn't work for them, but the third book did. So I will be continuing on the series, and I do actually own the third book, so I will be continuing on. Eventually, it's not a priority right now. So yeah, I actually gave this 2.5 stars. So the next book I picked up in October, I absolutely loved, and that was Dead Witch Walking by Kim Harrison. This is the first book in the Hollows, which originally started publishing, I believe, in the early 2000s, and this is an urban fantasy series. I really like this series because of the setting of the world. The setting of the world is a post-pandemic world where there was this virus that was kind of caused by fantastical creatures that affected the humans and made a lot of humans sick. And because of that, there is a very big divide between like magical people like witches, vampires, werewolves, and all that stuff, and the humans. So because of that, it's very interesting to see the magical creatures versus the humans and how they kind of coincide together, not so happily. So we're following Rachel. And Rachel is a witch, and she was working for this agency that's almost like a bounty hunter agency that go after people that are abusing magic. So she quits that. And because she broke her contract, they put a death warrant on her head. So she is like on the run, and she gets help from an old coworker who is a vampire. So in order to get a little bit of protection, she starts to live with this vampire in an old church. And it's just a lot of fun. She has like a pixie sidekick that has like a huge family. I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. It's not quite 5 stars because there were certain things that I kind of like, I was like, oh, but I honestly can see this series becoming one of my all-time favorite series. So yeah, I'm very pleased about that. So the next book I picked up in October is Blood and Steel. I don't know why I picked this up. I picked it up on a whim. I think it's because I had the access to the audiobook. And also I saw a lot of people reviewing it and saying it was a really fantastic series. And it was advertised as like a slow burn, dark romantasy series. And honestly, it was neither of that. It wasn't very dark, and the slow burn is not very slow. And it kind of read more like a YA than an adult. And I've heard that as the series goes on, that it does get a little bit steamier, and then it does get a little darker. And maybe I would have continued on if I connected with the writing style, but I did not. So I ended up DNFing it. So that is the second DNF that I had in October. The next book I actually finished was The Heartless Hunter by Kristen C. Cirilli. This is a YA book, and I have mentioned before previously that I don't usually read YA, but because it was getting such great reviews, and it was like 5-star reviews across the board, I was very tempted to pick this up. Not only that, it was very Halloween-y with a witch and a witch hunter, and it is written by a Canadian author, and I'm trying to support Canadian authors whenever I can. So because of that, I picked it up. And I'm happy to report I actually really enjoyed it. I loved how the witches were like almost royalty. There was a revolution that the humans basically dethroned these witches, and now witches are being hunted. And obviously we're following our main character, Rune, who is a witch. She is a witch in secret, so she kind of has 2 personalities. One is like the witch, and 2 is like this flighty, airy, stupid heiress who is like, you know, just likes to party in high society. And then the second POV is Gideon, who is a witch hunter who has had a very traumatic past. Actually, both characters have very traumatic past. I absolutely love the look of past trauma and dealing with past trauma and how it can affect your mental health and how to overcome that. I loved all of that. That was all great. And I absolutely love like the cat and mouse relationship that we have between Rune and Gideon. And, you know, they're both kind of trying to manipulate the other person, but, you know, in the end, they're being manipulated. It was very entertaining, and I really like that. So all of that was really great. Although the writing style was mostly fantastic, I did find that there was a lot of repetition, a lot of like telling, not showing, and some of the plot points kind of fell flat for me, especially towards the end of the book. Although I didn't like how we got to the ending, I did like the ending, and I'm very excited to continue on with the series when the next book comes out early next year. So the next book I want to talk about is yet another DNF, and that is Kingdom of the Wicked. This is a book that I've owned for quite some time and has since moved to the unhaul bin because I DNF'd this book at probably about 100 pages in. The setup was really interesting. It's almost like historic fiction where it takes place in Italy in the 1700s or maybe 1800s. I can't really remember. It is like almost like during the witch trials where, you know, witches, if someone found out that you're a witch, then you would be prosecuted. And so we're following a family of witches that are just basically, they run a restaurant and they're just kind of trying to lay low, keeping to themselves. Our main character is a twin, and she is the homebody twin. She doesn't like to get into trouble. She just wants to do her best. And her twin is like the one that gets into trouble, the one that pushes the boundaries. And something happens to the main character's twin, which kind of triggers her to start looking into this mystery, and we're just going to leave it at that. So I got to chapter 12, and in the 11th chapter something happens and the character's personality completely shifts, and I hated how that happened, and I hated that whole scene and the whole chapter, and I was feeling a little bit disconnected from the story before because I did find that the writing, although it was very beautiful, was super dramatic. Like everything was written in such a way that's just like, do you feel the drama? Do you see how dramatic this is? So I didn't really connect well with the writing, and then after that chapter I had zero desire to continue on with the series. So I DNF'd, and I mentioned before I unhauled the book. So that is unfortunate. The 8th book that I finished this month is Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. This is the beginning of a very epic series, and this is branded as romantasy, although this first book is not romantasy. It's more like fantasy with a romance subplot, but I'll be honest, in this book there's not much of that either. This is more like a setup of getting our characters from point A to point B, and I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with this book. Is it a new favorite? No. Could it possibly be a new favorite? Possibly, yes. This book reminded me of the earlier books in A Court of Thorn and Roses series. The plot was not really similar, but it gave me kind of the same vibes. So in this world, there are gods, and the gods breeded with humans, and these offsprings are called the descendants. And now the gods left, and they went wherever gods went, and left the world to the descendants to rule over. And now we are here with the descendants being basically high society, and everybody else, all the humans down below, are considered like second-class citizens. So it's a very interesting world where it's almost like a dystopian world in that aspect. The main character that we follow in this book is Diem, and she is a trained healer, trained by her mother, who goes missing in the very beginning of the book. And there's a lot of mystery around that. Time passes, and then we follow Diem basically picking up the pieces after her mom goes missing and is gone. So now she's kind of stepping up and taking over roles that her mom left. So now she's looking after her family. She's like a full-fledged healer now, and also she's kind of like navigating life as an adult. So then obviously something happens, and she gets the attention of the descendants, and we'll just leave it at that. I really like the world, and how the world was like broken up between different realms, and each realm the descendants have like different magic. Like in the realm that they're in right now, it is very much light based, where it's like light and shadow, and depending on how powerful you are, you either have light or shadow, or if you're really powerful you can have both. But in different realms it could be something different, like elemental or something like that. So I really enjoyed that. I thought that was a lot of fun. But the reason why this wasn't a favorite and it wasn't a 5-star is because the mystery wasn't so mysterious. Everything was pretty much laid out, and you can pretty much figure out what's going on by the 3rd chapter of this book. You're following around these characters and you're like, you are so stupid. Like, honestly, you should know what's happening because I know what's happening and everybody else knows what's happening. That kind of bothered me because it was just so obvious. It was so obvious right away. I felt like the element of surprise wasn't very surprising. And then the big reveal at the end, you're like, yeah, I knew it. But that's okay, because honestly, I'm very excited to continue on with this series, and I'm especially excited to see the romance blossom between the two characters because I absolutely love both of them. So I ended up giving this about 4.25 stars. It wasn't quite 5, it wasn't quite 4, so I did love it, and I am excited to continue on with the series. And then the last book that I read in October was The Good, the Bad, and the Undead by Kim Harrison. This is the second book in the Hollows I loved Dead Witch Walking so much that I picked up the second book in the series. I buddy read this with a couple of friends on my Discord, and we had so much fun. One of the people in Discord actually read this years ago, so it was a reread for them, so they were very excited to continue on. This series brought us so much nostalgia that it made us all very happy, and we're extremely excited to continue on. I can't say much about this plot because it is very much a continuation. It is like most urban fantasies where each book is very episodic. The other books are more like a series to a TV show, whereas this is more like an episode in a series of a TV show. So it's very much like, yes, each book covers something different, but the story, the plot line is carried through to the next one. And from what I hear, it gets epic, very much like Dresden Files. So if you like Dresden Files, you may like this one as well. And as of right now, there's not that much romance, so I'm not sure if that changes throughout the series. I ended up giving this book about 4.5. I absolutely loved it, and I'm so excited to continue on with the series. So that was my October wrap-up. I can't believe I finished so many books in October. I'm very proud of myself. Comment down below. Let me know what you read this month. And if you made it to the end, you don't really have anything else to say, leave a pumpkin for Halloween, because it was Halloween. As always, my socials are down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day. Bye!